interface has changed. Thanks. All right. So thanks everyone for joining this Our Ladies Philly meetup. So Our Ladies is a worldwide organization that promotes gender diversity in our community via meetups, mentorship, and a friendly and safe environment. We have a code of conduct that you can find at ourladies.org/COC. And gender diversity includes, but is not limited to, cis, trans women, trans men, non-binary, genderqueer, and agender. All are welcome here. You can get involved with Our Ladies. You can find our website at ourladiesphilly.org, learn about all of our events on meetup.com, join our Slack community, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, we would love to see volunteers for speakers, mentors, or organizers. Oof. And we are so thrilled to have Casey here with us today. Casey, I will let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. So as it says, I'm a senior developer at Taurus Research. So I build and reimagine Shiny applications. And my main focus is clean design and an effortless user experience. So I'm pretty passionate about making a lot of these complex dashboards and data feel very approachable through thoughtful, user experience, user interfaces. A Taurus is predominantly in the pharma industry, so that's where I think some of this sparked, because sometimes these pharma applications are a little dense. I am currently based in Denver. I'm actually moving tomorrow. I'm moving to Indiana, but I'm in Denver today. And on my kind of side second job, I compete for Puerto Rico in Olympic weightlifting internationally. And I have my two rescue dogs here with me today too. So if you hear them, that's who's with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing the slides and let you take it away.
So let me shift this over. Alrighty. Let me make sure. Can you guys see my, oh, no, because I didn't press the share button. There we go.
There we go.
You guys can see? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So my colleague and I gave a talk at PositConf earlier this year about the design of everyday Shiny apps. So today I'm not going to give the full talk again because I think it would be doing Maya and myself a disservice. We were wearing the pink jumpsuits. It was a fun, we had a lot of fun up there, but there is the YouTube recording to watch. So what I'm going to do today, and my focus is kind of to set the, to kind of talk about what the talk talks about, and give an overview for those who were not able to go to the talk, so you know what I'm talking about. And then towards the end, after I kind of go over the content, dig a little bit deeper into the code itself, because I think that's where some of like the tips and tricks of how we design apps will come into play and be a little bit easier to understand, like how to put it into practice. So this talk was designed off of Don Norman's Design of Everyday Things book. It's a great book. He talks about, well, the design of everyday things. So this example, I think, is a classic example that a lot of us face every day. This glass door with these handles. I walk up to this. I don't know if I should push or pull this door. They're glass, so everyone in this building can see, say it's a coffee shop. Everyone in the coffee shop can see whether I push or pull the door, and I'm going to feel maybe a little bit stupid if I do the wrong thing. So a lot of what design should be is, people struggle to use something, but the problem is not the user. It's that the designer needs to design it a little bit better. So like I just said, it's not the user's job to know what to do. It's the designer's job to make it obvious. So I've removed some of the slides that we had from the original talk, but we included a lot of these pictures from Katerina Camprani's The Uncomfortable series, where she illustrates just bad design, like this self-watering watering can where if I go to water something else, it's just going to put the water back into the can. It's just kind of silly. Um, so for this talk, this is kind of intentionally practical. So it's what my day to day really looks like, where I'm going to turn a proof of concept application into something that's functional, but also enjoyable for the user. So what I'll go through is these four lenses: layout, color, typography, and components. So these are really kind of the main four lenses that we focus on to take a proof of concept app and turn it into something that's production ready and a little bit more on brand. For the example I'm going to show today, we're using a fake client brand kit. So this is what our client gave us. We have 5 main colors, a single typeface, keeping it pretty simple. So as we talk through layout, color, type, and components, you'll see how applying the basics, nothing too fancy, to drive these consistent choices throughout the app. So what I'm going to do in the original talk, I did a demo and then kind of went step by step through each of the lenses. What I'm going to do today is go through some of the, I call it dense content, but I'm going to talk about the content and then I'll go back, do the demo. We can look at the code and then I'll show the updated app. And feel free, if there's any questions that pop up, interrupt me as I'm going. I definitely want this to feel a bit more like a conversation if there are any questions that come up. So when we talk about layout, the layout is kind of the foundation of how users experience your Shiny app. So this first principle is grid alignment and consistency. Humans crave structure. Even if we don't consciously notice it, when elements line up, our brain it tends to relax because we don't have to work to decode the interface. So in Shiny, this means choosing a grid system and sticking to it. Consistent margins, consistent component widths, and predictable placement of controls and outputs. So if one button floats a few pixels off, or a card isn't aligned like with its neighbor, users may not be able to tell what's wrong, but you might feel it subconsciously. So good layout tends to disappear. Bad layout becomes the experience. So the next thing with that is visual hierarchy and flow. Our eyes don't wander randomly. Most humans read screens in a predictable pattern, usually in a Z shape. So top left, across, down, and back across. So if everything on an app screen has equal visual weight, the user doesn't know where to start. Our job as a designer is to guide them. So make the most important thing unmistakably the most important thing. You can do this by using size, contrast, spacing, and position to create hierarchy. A strong anchor element at the top left, supporting content along the diagonal, and actions at the bottom right can allow users to move through an interface without really thinking. So when the flow works, again, the app is going to feel intuitive even before someone might understand what exactly the app is supposed to do. And this last piece is, there we go. This last piece is going to be white space. So this is a kind of sneaky design tool that I think we ignore the most, especially in data heavy Shiny apps, but it's one of the most powerful in my opinion. White space is not wasted space. It's what lets the content breathe. So it can separate ideas, prevent that cognitive overload, and keep every component from fighting for attention. So if you've ever opened an app and felt stressed without knowing it, it's possible that it's because there was a lack of white space. So this white space and the visual breathing room really gives your users room to think. It lets the elements rest. And when in doubt, you can remove something or add space around it. So like I said, empty space isn't empty, it's a design decision. So the next piece is color. This is one of the fastest ways to communicate emotion, importance, and brand identity in a Shiny app. A mistake a lot of developers make is to jump straight into colors before the structure is right. But color can amplify decisions, it doesn't necessarily fix them. So if your layout, spacing, and hierarchy don't work in grayscale, a color palette might not save it, especially with the one we're working with today. It's very bright and loud, kind of on purpose. Um, so starting in black and white, or even like default shiny, default BS lib, it forces you to really think on the essentials. What should the user look at first? What's primary versus secondary? And then once the design stands on its own, you can strategically add color. So you want to pick a color palette and stay loyal to it. A lot of, I think, again, with this talk, we're kind of talking about that brand identity. With my job working with pharma clients, we typically, they have their brand kit or they have um, their guidelines to stick to. And that's a really easy way to build consistency and trust within a user to know like every plot, button, and alert is going to use the same shade of blue. Because if I were to use, and I'll show it in the demo, if some of the colors are a little bit off, it creates a little bit of visual noise. So a good color palette usually has a primary color, a few accents, and neutral tones, and not too much else. So this is really where your brand is going to live. If someone were to screenshot an app and remove a logo, the colors should really tell who made it. And finally, with this, color should guide attention, not fight for it. So if you think of the app of color as the app's volume knob, most UI should sit around a whisper. So when something is important, a call to action button, a warning, a trend line, the color really speaks louder. If everything is bright, nothing feels important. When color is restrained, users instantly know what deserves the attention. And that's kind of the whole point. We're designing for clarity, not chaos. The next piece is typography. This is one of my favorites. Type is, I think, one of the underestimated parts of UI design, especially in some of these shiny apps, but it's one of the fastest ways to signal professionalism and really emphasize that brand identity even before a user clicks on anything in the app. So your typeface should reflect who you are, whether it's clinical and precise, bold and modern, quirky and exploratory, whatever your app really stands for. So once you pick a typeface, you want to use it intentionally. So headers, body text, labels should feel like they belong to the same family. Because this is a piece where if users can't describe your brand, but they feel it when they look at the text, that's typography doing its job. A lot of people think type is just picking a font size, but visual hierarchy comes far more from weight and case. And I will show this in the updated app when we get into the visuals. But a bold label feels more important than a larger but lighter one. All caps reads like a command, while sentence case feels a bit more conversational. Using weight and case strategically lets you guide attention without overusing color or making everything enormous. So in Shiny apps, this is especially important because we're constantly naming things, buttons, cards, filters. The way those words look shapes how people think about the action they're about to take. And this last piece is consistency. Pick a scale and stick to it. I really like this being a little bit more mathematical, I think, for a lot of programmers than that design focus. Something I try to always do is use increments of what I tend to do in my design is use increments of 4 pixels, but you could do that multiplier. You could do another different multiplier, but that was something I learned in some of my graphic design classes in school. So there's a reason to this. It helps create like an invisible rhythm. So when a header is, say, 32 pixels, your subheader is 24, and your body text is 16 pixels, the proportions just kind of like feel right. And I'll show this in the example as well to kind of put that visual to it. The same thing kind of applies with font weights. So if your headers switch from, and I'm using some of these numbers that might not mean anything, but if your headers switch from 500 to 900 to 600 to 700, that's going to be like your boldness. Depending on your mood, the interface is going to start to kind of like wobble visually. So consistency here gives the UI a spine. When the typography is balanced, users don't think about the text, they just understand it. This last piece is my favorite because I think the other three are pretty solid, just general design lenses to look through. But this components piece is really what takes us into things I'm thinking about as a Shiny developer. So this is kind of like the building blocks of, or like the sprinkles on top, rather, on a Shiny app. So they're not just UI elements, but they're kind of like touch points through which the user understands what's happening and what they're supposed to do. So humans are pretty impatient, especially in today's modern age where everything is like instantaneous, that instant gratification. If nothing appears, if nothing appears to respond, I'm going to assume something is broken. I might click again, or I'm just going to completely abandon a task. So that's why spinners, loading states, disabled buttons, ripples, and hover effects matter. So these tiny design cues build trust. A responsive component tells your user, I saw the input, I'm working on it, and here's what happens next. So in a Shiny app, that could be the difference between someone confidently exploring your data or someone wondering whether the app froze. So the best user experience isn't necessarily fixing mistakes, but is preventing them. Components can guide users toward the right action and away from the wrong one. So we use this with affordances, labels, and guardrails. If a user is about to overwrite a file, trigger a modal run, or delete a record, that the component should ask, like, are you sure? We want to have that confirmation of, are you sure you meant to delete this? So these confirmation dialogues, disabled states, and hint text or tooltips, they aren't annoyances, they're insurance policies. So when your components protect users from errors, you reduce support tickets, which I know as a developer, that's great. The less bugs we can have, the better. You reduce those support tickets, confusion, and panic from your users. So one of the biggest, I say sins, that sounds dramatic, but in some of these applications is overwhelming users with options right away. So just because Shiny lets us expose every parameter does not necessarily mean we should use it. Similar to white space, less is more. The progressive disclosure means giving user information when they need it, not all at once. So this would be tooltips, modals, accordions, and like guided flows that help the users build understanding step by step as they're going through an app. So a great component doesn't just sit there. It teaches, nudges, and clarifies. It helps users feel smart rather than lost. And when users feel smart, they keep using your app, which is what we want. So I'm going to shift into the demo, and then I'll kind of go back to like overall key takeaways. So let me pull this up. Like, what's a demo without a little bit of not technical difficulties, but just a little bit of
It
a laugh.
always takes a minute. Yeah.
Okay. So let me pull up, like I said, for the talk, what Maya and I had done was create what we called the Ugly app. This is the original app. Our client gave us an app, and they didn't want us to really change the functionality. They just wanted the user flow to be a bit better. So I'm going to walk through this app and then I'll shift over into the new one and then we can dig a little bit deeper into the code. Um, so when I first come into this app, I see this pop up with some information about the data set. But I think my biggest question when I press this close button is if I'll be able to come back to this later. So right away, I'm kind of asking like, what happens? So I'm going to close it. Um, the color palette is hitting us kind of all at once. It's pretty loud. And instead of guiding my eyes, it's pulling my attention kind of all over the place. This navigation with this sidebar is a little bit confusing too. I'm going to go into this report page and I'll add a project. Put our ladies demo in here. So I'm going to create a new one. And then it pops up over here, but I don't really know what I am supposed to do. I'm going to try to update the project name. I think these buttons are broken. We did this on purpose. But as you can see, some of this stuff, when I'm clicking a user, and I might be a more frustrated user than most, but I'm going to go in here and I'm going to keep clicking, thinking, okay, cool, the update wasn't implemented because I need to type something here. But some of this is, it might seem a little bit like foolproof, but if we can design things for the most naive user, that's the best way to kind of approach this. So I went ahead and clicked over on this sidebar, and now I can see, okay, I have these options here for me to do to output this report. So I'll put something in here. Press this button again. I saw a little something flip up here on the left-hand side. But again, I click the button and I don't know if it's broken or if it did download the file. It did, but it's a little bit hidden. So some of these visuals and really the unclear layout on this front page, it would make it easy to see how a new user could get a little bit lost or frustrated with, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. So this original app uses Shiny Dashboard. So I'm not sure, I haven't been able to look in the chat, but how many folks are familiar with Shiny Dashboard? Shiny Dashboard is a great tool to use for Shiny dashboards. None of this is to say, if you're using Shiny Dashboard, you shouldn't. But BSlib is a great package that I love and I use. I stopped using anything other than BSlib because I think for a lot of these more custom elements in an app, let me get this to load. But for a lot of these custom elements that I'm going to show in this app, BSlib has a lot of great variables to make this easier for the user let me try to. I had a feeling this was going to happen. Let's see if this gets back up here.
Oh, good. While you're waiting for it, how hard or easy is the conversion from Shiny Dashboard to BSlib?
So I think something I realized in open source is you have to kind of be okay with being uncomfortable and learning new things and maybe abandoning the new things, because you realize, okay, this isn't for me. But it was a bit of an adjustment, but the documentation for BSlib is really great. So that's my recommendation, is to kind of take a look at that, because to set up a lot of this, with the documentation made it easier for me to start with even just like basic BSLib without a lot of the custom CSS elements is still, I think, immensely better than base like Shiny Dashboard with a lot of the updates that they put in. Hmm. I don't know if we have any questions while my computer is waiting to load to pull this back up.
Questions. So we have some people that are inspired to look at BSLib down.
Okay. Fabulous. That, I think if that could be my one takeaway, that would make me so happy. And I do not work for Posit, so that's not a
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why. Oh, here we go. Beautiful. All right, let's pull this up. Fabulous. Okay. Worth the wait, I hope. So I think the big thing right off the bat with this app, and like I said, Maya and I, when we were thinking about how to try to really convey, the use of layout, color, type, and components, was the big piece was color, picking in intentionally bold like colorway for the app, be a color palette, because in the original app, right, there was just kind of color everywhere. I'm not showing, so in the GitHub repo, which is public, and I have a link to that at the end of the slides, we have the branch structure so that it's layout, color, type, components. So you can go piece by piece and see how we added these things. For today, I'm just going to go over the final app and then kind of dig into the code deeper. But right off the bat, we have a lot more white space. And I think general like breathing room. When I look at this layout, the grid is like nice and pretty. It's very like clean. Everything kind of lines up. A lot of this is the way that BSLib components work, which makes it a lot easier to have it span the page and be a little bit more responsive, which I think is nice because you don't need to have a crazy design background to be able to create something like this. So in the original app, we had that modal that popped up with the information about the data set. Now we have it as a popover. So anywhere I go, it's in the nav. So I can see this and kind of come back to it if I need to know something about the data. We're using color a little bit more intentionally. So color is going to color and the font weight is going to highlight when I'm hovering. As you can see, we shift from that primary, this is like the flamingo color, to the watermelon. So when I'm hovering over, I get that font weight and the color change to help me, help my brain be able to process, okay, I'm able to do something here. I'll cover this last. All of the colors are using, again, our brand kit colors. We're using the colors still here in these cards, but it's not, the main focus is the content in these cards, not the color. And I have a little bit, like my brain can look at this and know, okay, I'm reading across. Here are the controls that are going to update this plot. And then with this nested nav, it helps kind of guide me to know, okay, this is the main overview page. In this, I can look at the exploration or I can look at the data review. And a big thing with that left-hand sidebar I personally do not like a left-hand sidebar if I don't need to have one because I want to take up as much of the real estate on the page as I can. So doing something like having a nav, more like a website kind of layout, allows you to really have the content take up as much of the page as it can. The report page is a little bit reimagined as well. So if we remember in the last in the original app, when I created the project, we had that nav and then the project added to the side. I needed to click on it. Now what happens is we have, as a user, I know I need to add a project here. I can create it, and then it's going to pop up here where I can do my download. And if I click on this table, I can update or delete this row. And before I delete it, I get that confirmation, like I was talking about, that kind of guardrail that's going to stop me from deleting this example. And if I were to add another project in here, it's going to create it as another tab in this card. So some of this layout stuff is that consistency piece of similar visual cues that are going to help subconsciously guide a user to know, okay, in the overview page between overview and reports, I'm flipping through these like nav pills. I'm going to do the same thing here for the report page. And if I were to download this, now we have this progress bar and we have the error check that's telling me that it failed to generate it. Another piece that was just kind of for fun, in the original app, and I didn't show it too much, we just used a basic like data table output. This is using a custom HTML widget that I've worked on to utilize hands-on table framework, but make it customizable. So this required a little bit more JavaScript in there, but this gives like an Excel like feel to a table in here. We work with a lot of scientists, so a lot of times they want to see Excel. So this has been nice to use for some of our clients. Let me pop out of this. I'm gonna minimize this and go into the code. Before I talk about the code, I want to preface with this was code for a working demo that we needed for the conference. So some of the like new app code, I would recommend modularizing your code and maybe having it be a little bit cleaner for the sake of the conference. You know, we kind of just wanted to have a working solution in here. But really what I want to highlight, like I said, is we're using Shiny Dashboard for the original app. And we do have some of this custom CSS in here for what we did with the colors. This is a lot to be able to customize some of the Shiny Dashboard elements, I say easily, where when we get into BSLib, it's a little bit more seamless to make these updates to some of the BSLib elements. So I'll just shift over to BSLib. So what's really cool with BSLib, like I said, is having a lot of these in the BSLib, in the BS theme function. I can add in a lot of these different variables where I don't even need to touch my CSS yet. This is me just going in, and so I've defined my palette up here. I can go in and reference, okay, I want the background color for the underline. This is for the underline in the nav bar. I want that color to be that flamingo. This is going to be the text color. I'm putting in some padding in here. I have that hover color. And when we get into the tables, we can update some of the table variables in here. And for the cards at the top, you can just set the variable to a color instead of needing to, if I go back up here for these value boxes, having to do a lot of this extra CS inline. This is inline CSS, but having a lot of this extra stuff in here. BSLib allows us to have a lot of these variables defined before we're even getting into the code. And then it just kind of knows in the back end to grab these things. So what I love doing and how I really kind of, I think, learned how to customize BSLib was, and even with Shiny Dashboard, but right click and hit that inspect tool. So you can't see it because it popped up on my other screen. So let me pull this up. So when I go in here, you can see we have these like BSLib card values. So I'll pull up the CSS, but this is a really great way if you're trying to add some custom elements to take a look and kind of see where you might be wanting to put something a little bit more custom in here. And if I wanted to make an update in real time, I can also do that, which is cool. So you can kind of test and play around in your inspector before you're going in and updating the CSS fully. And I also want to say, I learned HTML and CSS when I was in undergrad because I pursued a graphic design minor. I hated HTML and CSS. So to now have this be a big part of my job, I think is some of a testament to like BSLib has made it easier. And some of this stuff, like I said, is like it didn't come naturally to me. It really has just been kind of an iterative process of really that like trial and error problem solving of looking at the inspector, trying to update the CSS. Okay, that didn't work. Let me go back. Let me update it. But a lot of these variables in BSLib link super easily to me just updating. So I guess, for example, like the cards. The cards in the application are custom in the sense that they don't have a border radius, so they're perfect squares. And we've added a box shadow that's a little bit different. But by putting in my custom CSS, just this BSLib card, that's going to apply everywhere, which is pretty neat. Same thing with these tooltips to be able to, let me find it down here, update some of my buttons for the tooltip and some of the select inputs to add my like hover color or active color that's pink instead of the blue. So this does require some CSS, but even just looking at the code, if you wanted to really dig deep into a lot of the BSLib variables, you could do a lot of this without needing to touch CSS. And I think to mention the layout with BSLib, a lot of the, if you're experienced with Shiny, a lot of the original Shiny functions are named a little bit differently in BSLib, but it's kind of, once you kind of learn the BSLib naming, that might be the biggest, like the hardest thing to learn up front is just, okay, these, the column names, the layout for the columns, this function is a little bit different than in just like base Shiny. But this is what I was talking about with these column widths to be able to put this inside a card or in the page. So there's a lot of this layout stuff that I think BSLib makes easier than having to navigate it within some of these other like dashboard packages, frameworks. So I don't know if there are any questions. Um,
I've
that
got
was,
one question.
yeah,
We've got a couple of questions. I'll start with a theme. So it looks like you're calling colors differently in themes. I feel like I see some hex codes and some character
yeah.
strings and some like accessing vectors, whatever. You just do what you want there.
So that's where, for this example, yes, Shannon,
Yeah.
we did
Okay.
kind of do what we wanted to do. I'll be honest, we did.
Yeah.
But yes, but
No, it was just like me
typically,
learning and like, okay, wait, I can do this like five different ways if I want to, right?
yeah.
Like,
So some of this is, do as I say, not as I do, right?
yeah.
Because yes, some of this was putting together a demo for a conference where we wanted the visuals, we weren't showing the code. So there is some cleanup here that I would probably like edit myself on. Um, because yes, there is right, like I'm calling the palette, but then I have this different like blackish color
Mm,
that should be
mm-hmm.
included in the palette to make it easier, but we didn't do that.
It's
So
fine.
we are using the
Yeah.
hex code.
No, it's
Yeah.
fine.
So there is kind of a mix, but I guess that to say there isn't one right way to do any of this. But the nice thing is with some of these variables that, especially when we're talking about a brand, if there are variables and consistent, like, the way that a button is styled is consistent, the colors are going to be consistent, the layout on pages is consistent. We want the cards to all have, no border radius. Those are things that you can all define in a BS theme with these variables, and they will be, used throughout the app. Um, for some of the more custom things that are like here and there, we've used some inline CSS, um, or, we have our style CSS file that has some of the more intricate details in there. Um, but yeah, a lot of how you set up this top portion, um, you don't need to do it this way, because clearly we didn't even do it that way throughout. So
It's fine.
yeah.
All right, we've got another question about colors. I usually like our color brewer, especially for color safe palette, how to balance this with brand palette, which are not. Do you try to suggest the change or is it impossible to do so?
So that's a really good question. I think for one of the clients we've worked on, because I think like we have in a lot of our applications, we have plots. So especially with clinical data, you might have a plot that has, 20 subjects. I'm not going to use their brand kit for the plot. I will use something that might be, because there are a lot of color palettes that are like colorblind friendly. So there are ways to where you might need to deviate from the color palette. Um, Really, it's kind of a recommendation for. I know one of the clients I worked for, their color is orange, and so their brand is like all orange. So there are ways to put some orange in there, use their typeface, put the logo in, and then have the rest of that. Maybe the rest of the app is black and white or it's grayscale. There are some touches of that color in there. Um, and that's where I really think starting from black and white, or, a more simpler palette can help. And then you kind of sprinkle in the brand's colors. So it's not as aggressive.
Makes sense. We have a couple of questions about the data table you showed.
Yes,
So did you use DT table or GT table or fully custom built table?
that's a great question. So what we did so I was working on a project last year, and I think there are so many for a lot of our users, and especially Shiny, like there's Reactable, there's so many table libraries that you can use, and each of them comes with pros and cons. So this one specifically was because a client had asked for they wanted Excel. And I had used our hands-on table, that package before, but it's pretty limited. And what they really wanted was the ability to, for any column, be able to have like this option for a user to come in and filter the table and really have it feel like Excel. So what this code is doing, my plan is to maybe make this a package one day. But what it's doing is I created a custom HTML widget that uses um, I called it handsome table because when I first started using hands-on table, I read it as handsome table. So it's kind of just a play on words. But what we did is create a this handsome table. So there is some JavaScript involved in this. This my goal is for this to not be if it becomes a package, you would just have arguments to update these things and it would update the JavaScript for you. Because I am not a JavaScript developer. I just looked at the hands-on table framework and updated a lot of this to make it custom. So this is a widget that's been edited between the CSS and the JavaScript. But when I use it in the app, I am just calling it as, let's see, as my handsome table output. And then within, so similar to how I would use like a DT output, it reacts the same way to that, where it's just going to take this handsome table and do the data. But a lot of it is that JavaScript and custom CSS.
Awesome. So in terms of like the skills you need for this, like getting started, I think I have an answer to this, but for someone who has no prior experience, would you recommend using BSLib first before learning Shiny Dashboard?
I think with where Shiny is going, I I think it depends on, that's where I'm saying my advice would be BSLib, because I think it can go a lot further and the documentation is just really good for BSLib to be able to see the examples and play around with a lot of the options. So I think like if I could go back and if I was learning Shiny right now, I'd probably just go with BSLib.
Sounds good.
Personally, yeah.
And then it seems like if you are using BSLib, I'm going to guess, it feels like it gets you like 50% of the way you want to be there to your design principles, or maybe more than that. And then the rest requires a little bit of custom tinkering.
Yeah, I would say for this, BSLib got us, and this is again making a pretty custom app, but a lot of like the components that we have in there with like the tooltips, popovers, um, BSLib gets you most of the way there. And then if you want to add, a background image to your nav, or you need to put a logo in your nav bar, add some different colors. Um, that's really where it gets custom, but a lot of that is just within updating some of the variables that BSLib includes.
You're still welcome to keep putting questions in the chat. Is there anything else you wanted to highlight for us today?
Um, I don't think so. I just hope that I think our hope for the talk really was making, like I said, you don't have to be a designer to design things that are intuitive. But Shiny is really powerful in what it can do with some of these like production ready applications. So really what I love doing is pushing the limits of Shiny, making something not look shiny. which is I think it's fun. It's probably not for everyone, but I think that's just my hope is that design is this like more accessible thing when in the programming world.
Awesome. Well, it certainly is now that you've showed us the way. So thank you so much. I think we can go ahead and stop the recording.